Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here because today's episode is a doozy. Today, I have 3 stories that nearly shattered everyone involved as they tried to rationalize what happened to them. Just wait until you hear what you're about to hear. So if you're enjoying the channel, don't be invisible. Let us know you're out there and smash that subscribe button so we can always be together. Thanks. Now let's get into the stories. So, picture this. My friend Tom and I were out in the middle of Wayne National Forest in southeast Ohio when this happened. So, here's the deal. I ended up there by pure chance, and let me tell you, it was a wild ride. You see, I'm not really one for remote places and all that nature stuff, but circumstances led me there. You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball and you just have to roll with it. Well, this was my curveball. It all started a few months ago when my friend Tom, who's into all these supernatural things, invited me to join him on a road trip. He had heard rumors about some strange happenings in Wayne National Forest. People going missing, eerie creature sightings, and whatnot. Now, I'm not one to believe in all that spooky mumbo-jumbo, but Tom's enthusiasm was contagious. Plus, I figured that it would be a good chance to get away from the daily grind for a bit. So off we went, driving through miles of winding roads and endless trees. I have to admit, this place felt different. The place was tucked away in the southeast corner of Ohio, surrounded by dense forests and hills. It had this eerie vibe to it too, like something out of a horror movie. But I brushed it all off. After all, that's just a bunch of stories, right? So we arrived to the forest late in the afternoon, and let me tell you, there wasn't much to see at first, but you could sense the history, like the place had stories to tell. Tom and I checked into this little motel, the kind you would find in an old movie where the protagonist gets chased by a chainsaw-wielding maniac. Classic. So we spent the first day exploring the nearby town of Haydenville, chatting with the locals and trying to dig up any juicy information about the supposed supernatural occurrences. Most of the people were tight-lipped, looking at us like we were crazy, but we managed to find a few who were willing to spill the beans. They spoke to us of strange figures lurking in the woods, unsettling howls sounding at night, and even sightings of a creature they called Bigfoot. Yes, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we were there for an adventure, right? Nightfall came and we decided to head out into the woods armed with cameras, flashlights, and I was holding a whole lot of skepticism too. Being out there at night seemed crazy to me. Anyway, we followed a trail that led us deeper into the forest with nothing but the sound of our footsteps and the rustling leaves in the distance. The air grew colder and the woods grew darker as we ventured further in. It was like stepping into another world deep in the heart of the woods, where the air was thick and the shadows were dancing like they were alive. At least enough to scare the bejesus out of me. Tom and I continued, though, and we ventured further into the unknown. The forest grew denser as we pressed on, with towering trees blocking out the moonlight and creating this eerie atmosphere that sent chills down our spines. Tom, all the while, was hoping to find something, see something that would quench his thirst. To me, the silence was deafening, broken only by the faint sounds of us walking and the movements of the forest. And then, suddenly, we heard it, a low growl emanating from somewhere nearby. It was a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very core of our beings. Our hearts skipped a beat as we exchanged nervous glances with each other. At least, I was nervous. I'm thinking Tom was probably excited. The reality of the situation, though, was sinking into us. We were not alone out there. And then the growling grew closer and louder, and we followed the sound, guided by both curiosity and this sense of impending danger. As we crept through the undergrowth, our senses heightened, and the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filled our noses. And then, there it was, emerging from the darkness like a creature from a nightmare. The Bigfoot creature stood before us, a terrifying fusion of man and beast. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity, piercing through the shadows with this unearthly glow. The creature's body was massive, towering above us on two powerful hind legs, while its arms extended into grotesque claws. The fur was dark and a matted mess, blending seamlessly with the shadows all around it. The beast's snout was elongated with sharp, glistening teeth protruding from its jaws, and its ears twitched, homing in on every sound as if it were acutely aware of our presence. I tell you, it was a sight that froze the blood in our veins. The creature possessed an aura of primal ferocity, a force of nature that defied all reason and comprehension. We stood there, paralyzed by fear and fascination, unable to tear our eyes away from this beast. And then the tables turned between me and Tom. Tom managed to find his voice and said we should leave. His eyes never left the creature, but his suggestion fell on deaf ears with me, because I was now captivated by this otherworldly creature. Was it curiosity, or perhaps morbid fascination? I don't know, but something kept me glued to the spot. And then, with an unexpected grace that did not match the monstrous form, the creature began to move. Each step it took was a reminder of the terrifying strength that lived within it. It moved closer to us, its hot breath fogging the cool night air. And though we were rooted in place by fear, something about the beast's demeanor began to shift. It wasn't just a terrifying creature suddenly. It also came across as a living being, maybe even more human than we had initially thought. But then it spoke. Its voice was a deep rumble that seemed to resonate from the very earth beneath our feet. It wasn't a language that we recognized exactly, more a series of growls and grunts. But the intent was clear. It wasn't threatening us. It was trying to communicate. Tom and I exchanged bewildered glances, not sure what to do. The eerie silence was eventually broken when Tom cautiously stepped toward the being, clearing his throat and attempting to mimic its sounds. His attempt was met with a long, scrutinizing stare from the beast. Its glowing eyes flickered, and the tense silence was broken when it actually responded. The growls and the grunts were seemingly more patient this time. Tom attempted to respond once more, a bit more confidently now. And then the exchange continued between them, and the tension between us all slowly dissipating. Gradually, an understanding developed. The creature was not there to harm us, but to warn us. But from what, we weren't sure. But we knew as we looked into its eyes that we needed to retreat, to get far away from that area as soon as possible. And once we understood that, we did not delay and we hightailed it out of there, back to the car. And that's where we sat and tried to comprehend what exactly happened during that most recent hour of our lives. Ultimately, that night would stay with us forever, and it would forever alter our perceptions of the world. And now, what we have confirmed are the hidden dwellers living right in our midst. Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, September 1979. I grew up in Martinsburg, West Virginia, which is really close to the border between West Virginia and Maryland. As a child, my dad took all of us kids, boy or girl, over to the wildlife preserve in Berkeley Springs to go hunting during hunting season. It was a 15-minute drive from our house, which was convenient, but the preserve itself was gigantic, and back then it wasn't even close to as fenced off as it is today. Dad hunted for all sorts of creatures back in '79 when there weren't many regulations to follow. We could go after whatever we wanted, whenever, and it didn't really matter how old we were. Usually my dad would get some deer and turkey, saving the meat for future meals. But on this trip, he was looking for bobcats to trade some fur in the area. As he always did, he got us up from our beds at about 5 a.m., handed us all some buttered toast and a glass of orange juice, and we were on our way, all 5 of us. Mom got to stay home with the new baby. The 2 kids under 13 didn't handle guns, so they stuck to Dad while he hunted. They just learned from him as we all did. We 3 teenagers had rifles, and we were sent on our way. We knew the area like the back of our hands. We just wandered off in different directions, all looking for bobcats. Dad said that he could get some good money for the furs, and since the holiday season was around the corner, we were itching to find as many as we could. I wandered south away from everybody in the family. I was the middle child of the 5 on the trip. I was 13 and not the biggest hunting buff, but I still was willing to do whatever Dad told me. I was definitely the odd one out when it came to our very American heritage, but my family didn't bully me about it, and I could have said no if I didn't really want to go. I wanted to see if I could be like everybody else. I figured if I went in the opposite direction of everyone, the more bobcats there would be for me to hunt and grab. I passed a pond and a few other clearings, and then I would end up back in the thick of the woods. It was still early morning, now about 7, when I finally came upon what sounded like an animal stirring in the bushes on a small rock path above my head. I hid myself against the rock to give the animal a chance to walk its way down to my level. But after a few seconds, nothing. I was confused because I knew I heard something coming, and there was only one direction it could have come from. I thought I should take a look to see if I could shoot it quick from the level where I was standing. As I peeled away from the wall, I looked up and came face to face with what appeared at first to be a dog. The eyes, though, and some of the features were almost human. The head was the size of 2 of mine. I was so stunned I couldn't even scream. I just dropped my rifle with the gun going off as it hit the ground. This really angered the beast because suddenly it began to sneer at me, and then it stood up on the edge of the rock to reveal how massive it actually was. At least 7 or 8 feet tall with claws that could rip me in half. The fur was black, like it hadn't bathed in months. Its eyes never left me as it began to make its way down the rock to the forest floor. Even its feet were massive, and I could hear its footsteps crashing into the ground. I was breathing so erratically at this point that I began to hyperventilate. This was no wolf, I thought. This was almost werewolf-like. But it was a sunny morning, and not the full moon. I could see the thing clear as day as it made its way around the rocks and towards me. But as it got within a few feet, I was unable to contain my fear any longer. I mean, I was only a kid at the time, and that's when I heard another bit of movement from the path that I came from, followed by a familiar voice, my oldest brother. Before my brother was able to approach and see us both standing there, the creature looked in his direction, turned, and took off, climbing back up the hill and out of sight. It happened so fast, but it felt like I had been standing there for years. I was shaking and still staring off at the trees in the distance as my brother came over to me. He had to snap me out of it by grabbing my shoulders and saying my name over and over. He had heard the gun go off and knew that one of us had to be there. He wanted to see if we had caught something. But when he looked at my face, which was stained with tears, I didn't even know I had cried. I couldn't speak. That's when he knew something else had happened. He then guided me back to the main area where the truck was parked, and he stayed with me until everybody got back. When my dad saw me, he said it looked like I had seen a ghost. I told him I did. I never went hunting with them again, and no one ever mentioned seeing what I saw on any of their future trips. Luckily, Dad just chalked it up to hunting not being something that I was meant to do. But really, that creature was so angry. I was afraid that if it ever saw anybody with a rifle again, it would eat them whole. That experience completely reshaped my life. I'm the only one of my siblings that left West Virginia. Now, I live in the city. I've got a story to tell you about a wild encounter I had while working as a park ranger in one of our beautiful national parks, Yosemite. Before we dive into the heart-pounding moment, let me give you a bit of background. As a seasoned ranger, I've spent years patrolling and exploring the vast wilderness of the park. It's my duty to ensure the safety of visitors and to protect the precious ecosystems that call this place home. On this particular autumn evening, I was deep in the heart of the park, where the dense forest seemed to stretch endlessly. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of red, orange, and gold, creating a breathtaking tapestry. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive. As I made my way through the winding trails, I couldn't help but feel a sense of tranquility. The beauty of nature never fails to amaze me. But little did I know that this peaceful evening was about to take a terrifying turn. Suddenly, I heard a low growl that sent chills down my spine. It was unlike anything, in a decibel that didn't sound normal. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart skipped a beat. I carefully scanned my surroundings, trying to pinpoint the source, and that's when my eyes picked up on something lurking in the shadows, just a few feet away. I squinted, and I moved closer, trying to make out any details, only to be completely shocked by what I saw. It was like no other being that I had ever seen in the park. This creature's eyes glowed a piercing yellow, reflecting an eerie light in the darkness. Its fur was reddish, dirty, matted. The creature stood on two legs, towering over me with a muscular and imposing frame. We certainly did not have any indication of something like this being in the park during training. The snout was elongated, resembling that of a wolf, but its teeth were sharp and menacing, capable of inflicting serious harm for sure. Its arms were long and muscular, with claws that protruded from its fingers. I couldn't believe my eyes. I was face to face with a creature straight out of hell. And now let me tell you, my instincts as a ranger kicked in really quickly. I slowly reached for my radio, ready to call for backup. But just as I was about to make the call, the creature let out a blood-curdling sound that echoed through the trees. I couldn't move. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the situation. Was this some kind of mythical beast? A legend come to life? Was I really even seeing this? I'd heard stories from fellow rangers about strange happenings in the park, but I never thought I would experience something like this firsthand. As I stood there, the creature took a step closer, with its large paws silently treading on the forest floor. Its long, sharp claws glinted in the moonlight, and I knew I had to act fast. I reached for my bear spray, knowing that it was my best chance of defending myself against this unknown entity. But just as I prepared to use the spray, the creature let out a mournful wail that sent shivers down my spine again. Its eyes seemed to plead with me, as if trying to communicate. In that moment, I saw something human in its gaze, an intelligence and a longing that I really can't explain. My instincts told me to hold my ground, to give this mysterious creature a chance. I slowly lowered my bear spray, and I took a step backwards, trying to convey that I meant no harm. The creature then tilted its head to the side, as if trying to understand my intentions, all while keeping its eyes firmly locked on mine. And then, in a flash, it turned and disappeared into the depths of the forest, leaving me standing there, bewildered and also amazed. I couldn't believe what just happened. A close encounter with a creature that defied all logic and explanation. I did immediately then radio in to report the incident, but deep down, I knew that this was a story that would be met with skepticism and disbelief. And yet, for me, it was a reminder that there are still mysteries out there, waiting to be unraveled.